The fake ashes sitting on my mantle for 5 years weren't ashes at all. They were coffee grounds mixed with cinnamon. And my son Trevor wasn't dead. He was locked in a warehouse while his wife Ashley collected my money and lived it up with her personal trainer boyfriend. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. I'm Eugene Patterson, 57 years old, and I used to supervise the night shift at Riverside Manufacturing until I retired 2 years back. 31 years of watching over assembly lines and making sure production quotas got met. My wife Marie passed 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer, and my son Trevor died in what I thought was a motorcycle accident 5 years ago. Or so Ashley, his wife, told me. Every January since Trevor's death, I've been sending Ashley $35,000. Not because I'm rich. I'm not. A factory supervisor's pension doesn't make you wealthy, but because that's what you do for family. Trevor left behind his wife and my grandson Kyle, who's 8 now. Ashley said the money was for Kyle's future, for childcare, for keeping them stable while she figured out how to raise a kid alone. $175,000 over 5 years. That's most of my retirement savings, but I didn't care. Trevor would have wanted me to take care of his family. That's what fathers do. That's what Marie would have expected me to do. Then last month, while I was taking Kyle for ice cream at Murphy's Diner, like I do every other Saturday, he grabbed my sleeve and whispered something that changed everything. We were sitting in our usual booth near the window, Kyle working on a chocolate sundae while I nursed a vanilla shake. The kid was telling me about his spelling test when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence and looked around the diner like he was checking for spies. "Grandpa," Kyle said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper, "please stop sending money to Mom." I nearly choked on my shake. "What do you mean, buddy?" Kyle leaned closer, his 8-year-old face serious, in a way that made my chest tight. "Mom has lots of money already. She buys expensive things all the time. New clothes, jewelry, stuff for the house, and Danny brings her presents. Danny, Mom's friend, he comes over when you're not there. They act weird together, like they don't want me to see them hugging and stuff." Kyle's eyes darted around again, and Grandpa, I heard them talking about you. "About the money you send." They were laughing about it. The ice cream in my stomach turned to lead. "What did they say, Kyle?" "Mom said you were easy money." And Danny said something about the old man doesn't ask questions. They didn't know I was listening from upstairs. Kyle grabbed my hand across the table. "Something's not right, Grandpa. Mom acts different when you're around, like she's pretending. Kids don't lie about stuff like that. Not 8-year-old kids who still believe in Santa Claus and think wrestling is real." So I started watching. Ashley Martinez Patterson, my daughter-in-law, lives in a nice split level on Oak Street about 15 minutes from my house. I helped with the down payment 3 years ago, another $25,000 check I wrote without thinking twice. The house sits on a quiet street with mature oak trees and well-maintained lawns. Every time I visited, Ashley seemed busy, distracted. Always on her phone, always rushing off to work appointments. She's a real estate agent, or at least that's what she told me. The first red flag came when I really started paying attention to her car. Ashley drives a 2022 BMW X3 metallic silver with leather seats and all the bells and whistles. That's a $55,000 vehicle, easy. For someone supposedly struggling to make ends meet on real estate commissions and my annual $35,000, it seemed like an odd choice. When I'd mentioned it before, she said the car was necessary for her professional image and that she got a really good deal on it. Then there were the clothes. Designer handbags that probably cost more than I made in a week back at the factory. Expensive shoes, I recognized the red soles that meant serious money. Jewelry that caught the light just right, the kind you don't buy at the mall. Her nails were always perfect, professionally done. Hair styled like she just stepped out of a salon. For someone raising a child alone and dealing with the supposed financial strain of widowhood, Ashley sure lived well. I wanted to believe her explanations. Hell, I tried to believe them. Maybe real estate was more lucrative than I thought. Maybe she was better with money than I gave her credit for. Maybe I was just a paranoid old man who watched too many crime shows and missed his wife's steady presence to help me think things through. But Kyle's words kept echoing in my head. They were laughing about it. So I called my old friend Keith Bradley. Keith had worked as a detective for the county sheriff's office for 30 years before retiring 3 years back. We'd known each other since high school, played softball in the same summer league for decades. If anyone could help me figure out what was going on without making me feel like a complete fool, it was Keith. "You think something's off with Ashley?" Keith asked when I called him up and asked if we could talk. We met at his kitchen table the next evening, drinking coffee from mugs that had seen better days and talking in low voices like we were planning a heist instead of discussing my family. Keith's house still looked like a cop lived there, everything neat and organized, a police scanner on the kitchen counter even though he'd been retired for years. His wife, Janet, was visiting their daughter in Florida, so we had the place to ourselves. I don't know what to think. I said, stirring my coffee even though I hadn't added anything to it. Maybe I'm just a paranoid old man missing his son and looking for problems where there aren't any. Keith pulled out a small notebook. He always carried one, even in retirement, and set it on the table between us. Tell me about the accident. Trevor's accident. Walk me through exactly what happened that night. That's when I realized how little I actually knew. Ashley had called me around 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March, 50 years ago. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Trevor had crashed his Harley-Davidson on Route 9, she said. The bike caught fire after hitting a tree. The body was too badly burned for identification, too damaged for an open casket. We cremated what was left and held a memorial service 3 days later. I remembered that night like it was yesterday, but the details Ashley had given me seemed thin now that Keith was asking specific questions. You never saw the body, Keith said. It wasn't a question. No, Ashley handled everything. She said it was too traumatic, that I didn't need to see Trevor like that. She said she could barely handle it herself. I paused, thinking back. She seemed so destroyed by it all. I didn't want to put more pressure on her. Keith made notes in his careful handwriting. What about the police report? Insurance claims? Hospital records? Did you ever see any paperwork? I stared at him, feeling stupid. In 5 years, I'd never asked for any of that. I'd been so destroyed by grief, so focused on trying to keep Marie alive and functioning in those final months before cancer took her too, that I let Ashley handle everything. She was Trevor's wife. She was grieving too. Why would she lie about something like that? Eugene, Keith said gently, we need to do some digging. Over the next week, Keith worked his old contacts at the sheriff's office and the state police. What he found made my blood run cold. There was no police report for a motorcycle accident on Route 9 on the date Ashley claimed Trevor died. No hospital records showing a burn victim brought in that night. No insurance payout for a destroyed Harley-Davidson. No tow truck called to remove wreckage. Most importantly, no death certificate filed with the county clerk's office. According to official records, Trevor Patterson was still alive. This doesn't make sense, I told Keith when he showed me the printouts he'd gotten from his buddy at the courthouse. We were back at his kitchen table, surrounded by documents that proved my son's death was a complete fabrication. We had a funeral. People came from all over. Ashley cried through the whole service. I gave a eulogy for God's sake. Eugene, Keith said, his voice gentle but firm, I think your son is still alive, and I think Ashley has been playing a very long con on you and everyone else. The words should have made me happy. My son might be alive. But all I felt was rage, pure and burning. If Trevor was alive, where was he? Why hadn't he contacted me? And why was Ashley collecting money in his name while letting me believe he was dead? What do we do? I asked. Keith leaned back in his chair, studying the documents. We need proof. Real concrete evidence that'll hold up if this goes to court. And Eugene, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that Trevor might not be free to contact you. If Ashley's been lying about this for 5 years, she's got something serious holding him in place. The next phase was surveillance, and I felt like a complete fool doing it. A 57-year-old retired factory worker playing detective sitting in Keith's gray sedan across from Ashley's house like some character in a bad TV show. But Keith assured me it was legal as long as we stayed on public property and didn't interfere with anyone. For 3 days, we watched Ashley's routine. She left the house around 9 a.m. every morning, always dressed professionally in her expensive clothes, carrying that designer handbag. She'd come back around 2 p.m., stay for an hour or so, then leave again around 7 p.m. wearing workout clothes. Not exactly typical real estate agent hours, and definitely not the schedule of a struggling single mother. Where's she going all day? I asked Keith as we watched her pull out of the driveway in that BMW on the 3rd day. That's what we're going to find out, he said, starting the engine. On the 4th day, we followed her. Ashley drove through downtown, past the real estate office where she supposedly worked, and headed toward the industrial district on the east side of town. This was a part of the city I knew well from my factory days, all warehouses, loading docks, and manufacturing plants, not exactly prime real estate territory. She pulled into the parking lot of Building 447, a weathered red brick structure with narrow windows and a loading dock that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Keith and I watched from behind a delivery truck parked across the street as Ashley walked to a side entrance like she'd done it 100 times before. She stayed for exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes. I know because Keith timed it. What's she doing in there for over 2 hours? I asked, my hands sweating despite the cool October air. Keith was already on his phone looking up property records. Buildings owned by a shell company called Martinez Holdings LLC, registered for storage and light manufacturing, but according to this, there's been no business activity reported in the last 3 years. When Ashley finally came out, she wasn't alone. A guy followed her, mid-20s muscular build, wearing a tank top and workout shorts despite the weather. They stood by her BMW talking for several minutes, their body language intimate and familiar. Then he leaned down and kissed her, not a friendly peck on the cheek, a real kiss, long and passionate, like lovers who'd been apart. "That's not grief counseling," Keith muttered, snapping photos with a camera that had a lens longer than my forearm. We tailed the guy to Gold's Gym downtown, keeping our distance as he parked a beat-up Dodge Challenger and went inside. Keith waited 20 minutes, then followed him in. I sat in the car, my mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. Keith came back 30 minutes later with information that made everything worse. The guy's name was Danny Rodriguez, 28 years old. Personal trainer specializing in executive fitness programs. According to the desk clerk who knew Keith from when he was a cop, Danny had been bragging for years about dating some older woman with serious money and how he was set for life because of it. That night, Keith and I sat in my living room staring at Trevor's urn on the mantel. The brass gleamed in the lamplight, Trevor's name and dates engraved on a small nameplate that I'd stared at thousands of times over the past 5 years. I talked to that urn like Trevor could hear me, told it about Kyle's achievements in school, about Marie's final months, about how much I missed them both. "Eugene," Keith said carefully, "when's the last time you looked inside that thing?" "What do you mean looked inside?" "It's sealed. It's supposed to stay sealed." Keith's expression was serious, the way it got when he was working a case back in his cop days. Humor me, with shaking hands, I lifted the urn from the mantel. It felt heavier than I remembered. Substantial in a way that had always comforted me. The lid was threaded like a jar, designed to screw off easily, though I'd never had reason to open it. The funeral director had sealed it himself while Ashley and I watched. I unscrewed the top, my hands trembling. Inside was a clear plastic bag tied with a red twist tie. Through the plastic, I could see dark, coarse powder that looked exactly like what I'd expected cremated remains to look like. I opened the bag and the smell hit me immediately. Rich, unmistakable coffee. Not the sterile, burnt smell I'd always imagined cremation ashes would have, but the deep, earthy aroma of ground coffee beans. I dipped my finger into the powder. "Coffee grounds," I said, my voice hollow, "and something else." Keith leaned closer. "Cinnamon. Coffee grounds and ground cinnamon. Probably grabbed it from her spice rack before the funeral. For 5 years I'd been honoring coffee grounds. I talked to that urn like it contained my son's remains. I'd cried over it when the loneliness got too heavy. Marie had kissed it goodbye before she died, whispering apologies to Trevor for leaving him alone. And it was kitchen scraps, stuff you'd throw in the garbage or use for compost. The rage that hit me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. White hot and consuming, it burned through my chest and made my vision blur around the edges. "We're going to that warehouse," I said, standing up so fast I knocked over my coffee mug right now. "I'm getting my son back." Keith grabbed my arm before I could head for the door. "Not yet, Eugene. We need evidence that'll hold up in court. We need to be smart about this. My son might be locked up in there right now, and if we go charging in without a plan, we could make things worse for him. Think about it. If Ashley's kept this going for 5 years, she's got contingencies. She's got threats to hold over Trevor's head. We need to outsmart her, not outmuscle her." Keith was right, but it was the hardest thing I'd ever done waiting. We spent the next day coordinating with his friend Detective Dennis Cooper from the county police. Dennis specialized in fraud cases and had the authority to set up a proper sting operation that would actually hold up in court. The plan was simple but risky. I would confront Ashley wearing a wire and get her to confess. We'd tell her I'd discovered some financial irregularities and needed to discuss Trevor's estate. If she thought I was getting suspicious, she might panic and reveal the truth about where Trevor was and what she'd been doing with my money. The key, Detective Cooper explained as we met in a conference room at the police station, is making her feel like she still has control of the situation. If she thinks you're just a confused old man asking innocent questions, she'll try to manage you the same way she has for 5 years. Cooper was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s. With the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing, he'd spread photos across the table, surveillance shots Keith had taken of Ashley and Danny at the warehouse, financial records showing the shell company ownership, and copies of the non-existent police reports. "What we need," Cooper continued, "is for Ashley to admit 3 things. First, that Trevor isn't actually dead. Second, that she's been taking your money under false pretenses. And third, where Trevor is being held. The wire will record everything she says, and my team will be close enough to move in immediately if things go wrong." The wire was smaller than I expected, just a tiny device clipped under my shirt collar, no bigger than a shirt button. Detective Cooper's team tested it 3 times, making sure the audio was crystal clear. They could hear every word from their surveillance van parked 2 blocks away. "Remember," Cooper said as he adjusted the wire one final time, "stay calm. Let her do most of the talking. The more comfortable she feels, the more likely she is to slip up and tell you things she shouldn't." I arranged to meet Ashley at her house that evening under the pretense of discussing some insurance paperwork. I told her I'd been going through Trevor's old files and found some discrepancies that needed clearing up. She seemed nervous when I called but agreed to meet at 7 p.m. During the drive to Oak Street, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. This was my daughter-in-law, someone I'd trusted with my son's memory and my grandson's welfare. Someone I'd written checks to without question because family takes care of family. The thought that she might have been laughing about my grief while cashing those checks made my stomach turn. When I knocked on her door at exactly 7 p.m., Ashley was dressed casually, jeans and a navy sweater, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, older than her 32 years, and I wondered briefly if maybe I was wrong about everything. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. "Hi, Eugene," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Come on in. Can I get you coffee?" We sat in her living room, surrounded by furniture that probably cost more than I made in 3 months back at the factory. Everything was expensive but tasteful. Leather sofa, glass coffee table, artwork on the walls that looked like originals. For someone supposedly struggling financially, Ashley had excellent taste and deep pockets. "Ashley," I said, pulling out a manila folder I'd brought as a prop, "I've been going through some old paperwork, and I found some discrepancies about Trevor's accident." Her smile faltered just slightly. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Well, I was looking for Trevor's life insurance policy. Making sure Kyle's college fund is properly set up, and I couldn't find any record of the accident claim being filed." Ashley's hands started shaking. She clasped them together in her lap. But I could see the tremor. I'm not sure I understand. I called the insurance company. They said no claim was ever filed for Trevor's death. No motorcycle accident, no payout, nothing. I paused, watching her face carefully. And when I checked with the state police about getting a copy of the accident report, they told me there's no record of any motorcycle accident on Route 9 that night. The color drained from Ashley's face. She stood up abruptly, walking to the window and staring out at the street like she was expecting someone. "That's impossible," she said, her voice hollow. "Of course there are records." "Then show me." She spun around, her composure starting to crack. "I don't have them here. They're in storage, with all of Trevor's other things." "Ashley," I said quietly, "where is my son?" For a long moment, she just stared at me. I could see her mind working, calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. The wire against my chest felt hot, recording every word, every pause, every breath. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice breaking. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. It was just supposed to be temporary. Then help me understand." Ashley began pacing around the living room like a caged animal. Trevor found out about Danny, about us. He threatened to leave me, take Kyle, ruin everything I'd worked for. "So you killed him?" "No. God, no. We made him disappear." The words hung in the air like smoke. Through my earpiece, I could hear Detective Cooper's team preparing to move, but they were waiting for more details. "Made him disappear, how?" Ashley stopped pacing and looked at me with empty eyes. "The accident was staged. We made it look like Trevor died, but he's not free to leave." "Where is he, Ashley?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really want to know?" "After 5 years of sending me money, after all those conversations about how grateful I was for your support, you want to know where your precious son has been?" "Yes, building 447 on Industrial Avenue. The warehouse where Danny works out. Trevor's been there for 5 years, and he's going to stay there until—" She paused, seeming to realize she'd said too much. "Until what?" "Until we figure out what to do with him." That's when I heard the sirens. Detective Cooper's team surrounded the house within seconds, their timing perfect. Ashley looked confused and then terrified as police officers came through the front and back doors simultaneously, weapons drawn but pointed down. "Ashley Martinez Patterson," Detective Cooper announced, his voice calm and professional. "You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, false imprisonment, and extortion." As they handcuffed her, Ashley looked at me with something between hatred and grudging respect. "You played me," she said, her voice bitter. "I just told the truth," I replied, watching as they read her rights. "Something you should have tried 5 years ago." The rescue operation at the warehouse happened immediately. I rode with Detective Cooper, my hands shaking as we pulled into the parking lot of Building 447 with a convoy of police vehicles, lights flashing but sirens silent. They wanted the element of surprise in case Danny was inside. The building looked different at night, more sinister. Keith met us there with a set of bolt cutters, and within minutes they had the side door open. Detective Cooper went in first, followed by 3 officers in tactical gear. I stayed outside like they'd ordered, but I could hear their voices echoing through the empty warehouse, clear in the front section. Movement in the back, northwest corner. Subject located, male, conscious, requesting medical assistance. They found Trevor in a makeshift room in the back corner of the warehouse. Someone had built walls using industrial shelving and tarps, creating a space about 12 feet by 12 feet. Inside was a cot with thin blankets, a folding table with a hot plate, and a bucket for waste. The smell hit me before I even saw him, the stench of a man who'd been living in captivity for years, but it was Trevor, my son, alive but broken. He was thinner than I remembered, probably 40 pounds lighter than when I'd last seen him. His hair was longer, unkempt, streaked with gray that made him look older than his 29 years. His clothes hung loose on his frame, and when he saw me, he broke down crying like a child. "Dad," he said, his voice hoarse from years of limited use. I thought you'd given up on me? I pulled him into a hug, and he felt fragile in my arms, like he might break if I held him too tight. "Never," I whispered. "Never." The paramedics checked him over while Detective Cooper took pictures of the makeshift prison. Trevor was dehydrated, malnourished, but physically intact. The real damage was psychological. He flinched when officers moved too quickly, spoke in whispers, kept looking toward the door like he expected Danny to appear and drag him back to his corner. "How did they keep you here?" I asked when the paramedics said he was stable enough to talk. Trevor's voice was barely audible. "They told me if I tried to escape, they'd hurt Kyle. Kill him, maybe. They said they had people watching him at school, at your house. They made me believe it." He looked up at me with hollow eyes, "And they told me you thought I was dead, that you'd moved on, that Kyle was better off without me. None of that was true. I know that now, but after the first year, after no one came looking for me, I started to believe it. Ashley would visit sometimes, tell me how well Kyle was doing without his unstable father around, how you were happier thinking I was dead than dealing with my problems. The lies Ashley had told went deeper than just the money. She'd convinced Trevor that his own family had abandoned him, that his imprisonment was somehow justified. Danny Rodriguez was arrested at his apartment 2 hours later. The police found financial records showing exactly how he and Ashley had spent my money over 5 years. Vacations to Mexico and Las Vegas, expensive jewelry, payments for the warehouse rent, a detailed ledger showing they'd been planning this con for months before staging Trevor's death. The trial lasted 6 weeks and made headlines in the local paper. The prosecutor painted a picture of calculated cruelty that went far beyond simple fraud. Ashley and Danny had destroyed not just my finances, but Trevor's mental health and Kyle's understanding of his family. Ashley's defense attorney tried to claim she was a victim too, that Danny had manipulated her into the scheme. But the wire recordings destroyed that argument. Her voice was clear and cold as she described keeping Trevor imprisoned, laughing about the money, planning their future together while my son rotted in a warehouse. The judge wasn't sympathetic. Ashley got 12 years in federal prison for fraud and false imprisonment. Danny got 8 years as an accomplice. Both were ordered to pay full restitution, $155,000 plus damages for emotional distress and Trevor's medical care. Danny broke down crying during sentencing, claiming he never meant for things to go so far. Ashley sat silent, staring straight ahead like the verdict was happening to someone else. Recovery took time. Trevor spent 3 months in a rehabilitation facility, learning to trust people again, working through years of psychological abuse. Kyle needed therapy too, trying to understand why his mother had lied about his father being alive, why she'd kept them apart. But we made it through. Trevor moved into a small apartment near my house. Kyle stays with me most of the time now. Ashley's parental rights were terminated as part of her sentence. She can't contact Kyle, can't interfere with our family again. Some evenings, Trevor comes over for dinner, and we sit on the back porch while Kyle plays in the yard. Trevor's putting on weight, getting stronger. He's talking about going back to school, maybe learning a trade. The nightmares are less frequent now. Kyle calls him Dad again, which makes Trevor cry every time. We buried the fake ashes properly in Riverside Cemetery, next to Marie's grave where they belong. Had a real service for the years we lost, the grief that was stolen from us. The whole community came out, people who'd been at the first fake funeral 5 years ago. I got most of the money back through restitution payments, but honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is sitting on my porch on Saturday mornings, watching my son teach my grandson how to change the oil in my old truck. What matters is family dinners and birthday parties and all the ordinary moments Ashley tried to steal from us. The $175,000 I thought I'd lost to help my family. Turns out I was helping my family all along, just not the way I thought. Every dollar was evidence, every payment a step toward bringing Trevor home. Ashley thought she was playing a grieving old man, counting on my love for my family to make me an easy mark. She was right about the love part. But she forgot that same love would make me fight like hell to protect what's mine. Justice isn't always perfect, but sometimes if you're patient enough and smart enough and stubborn enough, it's exactly what you need. And family, real family, is worth fighting for no matter how long it takes. Trust your gut when family members change their behavior. Children especially notice things adults miss because they haven't learned to ignore red flags yet. When someone consistently avoids providing documentation or proof for major life events, that's not grief or privacy, that's deception hiding something worth investigating. Real love for family means asking hard questions when something doesn't add up, even if those questions make you uncomfortable or challenge people you trust. The best revenge against financial predators isn't violence, it's patience, evidence, and letting the legal system deliver consequences that stick. Elder financial abuse often targets our strongest emotions: love for family, desire to help, fear of losing relationships, but protecting yourself protects your family too.